Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hey there, witches! Welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla, and in this episode, we are doing another Try It project. This time, we're trying a lammas craft. We're doing corn dollies this week. Lammas or Lughnasadh is August 1st. We'll go over a little bit of our confusion and what we got wrong in the beginning, as well as ways to make a corn dolly for yourself, for your altar, as a spell, or to celebrate Lughnasadh. How you doing there, Chelle?
Hey, I'm glad to be here, and I'm confused about corn dollies, but here we are.
Yeah, I think there was definitely some confusion, at least on my part, because we're both from upstate New York. We both still live in the northeast of the USA.
You don't get that kind of corn until like September, man.
Right? We have like the knee high by the 4th of July.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that some of the farm stands and definitely the grocery stores have corn available. So if you wanted to make a corn dolly with corn husks, you could. But we'll get into that and all about the lammas craft of corn dollies, some of the history, what you can do with it, the magic, the ritual, the spells, all that good stuff here in just a moment. But first, I want to say a huge thank you to Star Ann Ravenhawk, the host, the founder of Witches Fest USA in New York City that just had their 13th annual festival. Chelle and I were down there. It was amazing.
First of all, it was blazing hot. Let's just put that out there.
It was like 90-something% humidity, and I think it was over 100 degrees.
The feel like was 114, and I felt every single one of those 114 degrees.
Oh, yeah. Shade was at a premium. Everyone was dripping with sweat, but there was a lot of smiles and a lot of fun and a lot of witches. It was very cool.
But what else was there of?
Actually, we had a very cool moment.
What did we find there?
We're sitting in the shade, sweating our balls off.
Honestly, smoking weed, not gonna lie.
Waiting for our workshops to come up. And all these people are walking by. There's music playing. And yes, we were indulging in a little bit of the smoke, which is probably how she recognized us at first, to be honest. But this gorgeous witch goes walking by and stopped, turns around, looks at us, and says, Are you Laylla and Chelle from Back on the Broomstick? And we were like, well, yeah. Yes, we are. I thought she had just read our workshop descriptions. Yeah. But no, she didn't even know we were going to be there. She's a fan. Hi, Terry.
Hello again.
Made my day. Absolutely made my day. How fun was that?
No, she was freaking fabulous. And by the way, I just want to apologize to her. If I seemed a little off in my workshop, it was because I was sweating my body weight out, okay?
Yeah, it was definitely a hot day. And all we had were these little easy ups. But it was very cool to see Terry. And you also had another fan of ours in your workshop. So at least two people who are Back on the Broomstick fans. We had a wonderful time, and it was very cool seeing people. So thank you for stopping by to say hello.
And thank you for braving the heat with us, too.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people. I guess it was the best attended in years. We had a great time. Thank you, Star.
I thought it was freaking fabulous.
It really was. I don't know if she listens to the podcast, but the harpist, Michelle Mountain, played one of my favorite songs, Savage Daughter. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but I love that song.
She was freaking fabulous. The belly dancers were great. It was a good day in New York City.
It was a good day.
It was a good day for the witches to gather.
And then, of course, came back home to my beautiful spot in the wilds of central Pennsylvania. And we had a try it to do.
We haven't done a try it in a long time. And I was like, hey, let's do something fun and crafty. So I know that you kind of started off with the corn dolly thing, but we did want to kind of encompass all types of poppets. And because of I don't know, I'm from New York. I don't even look for dried corn leaves until like September. It's a thing. So I went the poppet route.
Well, before you go there, let me kind of explain something, because I didn't know this until I started looking. I thought corn dolly, like the corn husk doll. I have a kitchen witch corn husk doll. that's 25 plus years old that I got as a house blessing.
Made out of corn husk, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
she follows me from house to house. However, while I was researching this craft, because I've never made one before, I found out that in pre colonial days, back in Ireland and Europe, corn was just another word for grain. It meant any type of grain. So oats, barley, rye, wheat, those were all corn because it was pretty much just another word for grain. And then when they came here to the Americas and they were introduced to maize, they called it Indian corn because it was a grain that the Native Americans introduced them to. Then we just dropped the Indian part and kept it as corn. So that's why when we Americans say corn, we're thinking of maize. And it used to mean any type of grain.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
So the Lammas craft of corn dollies, because Lammas is the first harvest. All around me, I live in the middle of farm country, basically, and most of the farmers around me use horses and not engines to do their work. You know, the first haying has already happened, and now I'm seeing the big straw bales get picked up. The little farm stands outside of everybody's house are being filled more and more. This is the first fruits harvest. And so where corn dollies came from was a way to honor those first fruits. When they would harvest their corn, which would be like wheat or grain or whatever, they would take some sheafs of the wheat and they would braid it into a vague representation of a figure. So it's just kind of like a 4 or 5. They can be very elaborate, but it's just kind of like a braid. It has a round top and then the sheafs are down at the bottom. I'll show lots of pictures. It's hard to talk about. But this representation was to hold the spirit of the grain. And so the first person to harvest their crops around Lammas would braid a corn dolly and then would toss it into their neighbor's field who hadn't yet harvested their crops as a way to kind of like bring that blessing of harvest to them. And then once they harvested their crops, they would drop that corn dolly off at the next farmers who hadn't, and so on until the last person was left with the corn dolly. And they would keep it safe all winter to hold on to that spirit of the crops, the goddess of the grain, and keep her soul in that corn dolly. And then they would either burn it or bury it to bring fruitfulness back to their crops. So that's why it's called a corn dolly, but you really make it out of grass or wheat or oat or straw.
Nice. I was looking for actual corn. But here's why. Because I did take the poppet route, I decided to make a poppet really because I thought that a corn dolly was that. A poppet is, you can do a couple different things spell-wise with them, but essentially it is kind of a doll made to represent a person if you are looking to do some magic aimed at that person, good, bad, or indifferent, not for me to judge. So I think in the old days, they used to find them lodged in the walls and in chimneys. When you came and visited me one time in Salem and we went to the witch house, didn't they have one that they had found like shoved in a wall or something?
They did. They have one at the Salem Witch House. I think we both have pictures of the poppet and glass. And I believe when we were doing our other podcast and we were actually searching Salem for any signs of hauntings in these
That poppet was one of them.
That poppet was one of the few things that we felt something emanating from. What people back then in the 1600s and even prior to that used to do is it was a relatively common folk practice for people to create a doll and put it in the walls of their house and hide it there. And the idea was that anything malevolent or bad being sent at the house would go to that poppet and would be distracted by the poppet. And so the poppet would take all the curses or negativity aimed at your household. So it was a protection thing, a good luck thing.
But like I said, you can also make them to represent a person to essentially either cast a spell on them or aid them in some way. And these are actually not just made of corn. Actually, this is so funny, and I'm going to post pictures. You can use a lot of different things as poppet. And I have got a couple good examples here that I find very crafty and yet useful for what you get. I actually have about a 6-inch tall baby doll.
Okay, yeah.
And that is actually this is something I bought for a poppet type thing for this. But I can use this for that kind of house protection or like what you were just talking about. Now, if I was going to do something, say, I wanted to either cast a spell on someone or aid someone in some way. One type of puppet I like to make, because we've all seen the one that's like shaped like a gingerbread man filled with herbs and sewn together. That's super common. But we used to make these as kids. I don't know if that's creepy or if that's cool, but yarn dolls. Basically, what it is, and I have pictures of the process that I'll post up. You cut some yarn, you kind of fold it in half, tie off the head, and then do the arm thing so it looks like you have like a person.
A poppet can be made out of anything. You can mold it out of clay, you can make it out
Yep.
of yarn,
Material.
lavender. I have one that I made out of, once I got tired of making the braided traditional corn dollies, I tried to make a corn dolly out of the lavender and flowers I have here. So I'll post that up. But anything that you can make look vaguely humanoid can be
Right.
your poppet.
You can even use carved wood, and that's where I've seen like actual corn dollies where they take the dried corn husks and shape it into a person. So that's what I thought I was going for and couldn't find it, and we ended up with the yarn dollies. This creates like a representation of a person.
Poppets are a form of sympathetic magic.
Again, whatever your purpose is, you can use that for a love poppet. You can have a healing poppet, a protection poppet, a prosperity poppet, whatever your intent is. But it doesn't have to be corn, is I guess my biggest point.
Yes, if you're talking about a corn dolly, that's a specific thing to hold the
Right,
spirit of the grain. And I'll go over some different spells and different ways that you can use that for Lammas a little later in the episode. But it basically is a poppet.
I look at a corn dolly as a poppet with a specific purpose.
The corn dolly is more to represent the first harvest of the season and to hold the goddess of the grain, that particular purpose. And poppets can be any purpose you want them to.
But I love my little yarn doll. Like for some reason, it looks like some crone witch or a
It
ghost.
does. It does. What materials you choose can help aid you in your spell. So Chelle chose black yarn.
Black yarn,
So
yep.
that could be for something for protection, for banishment. Maybe it's so someone could be more witchy because it kind of looks witchy.
Whereas the baby doll, I might use more for like a protection or like a healing type thing.
Because it looks just like a person, you can specify, you can, put something on the eyes and say this is so they can see more clearly. But it's a form of sympathetic magic, which is basically like for like. Because it looks like a person and you would put things on it to represent that person. Maybe they have blonde hair, so you put blonde yarn on it to represent them. The more you can make it like that person, the better sympathetic magic will work.
I don't want to say the more effective.
It is.
I don't want to say more effective, but yeah.
Yeah, more effective for sure. 100% more effective. If you write their name on a piece of paper and put it inside Poppet, if you take a piece of their clothing or cloth they have used and make a dress or a shirt for the Poppet, things like this are called tag locks. Basically, if you want this spell to target a specific person, you could just make a generic Poppet, name it that person's name and say that's them, and that's fine. But the more things you can use to represent that person, the more tag locks like hair, saliva, blood, urine, skin, fingernails, their clothing, something they've slept in, something they've partially eaten, all these types of things are tag locks.
Tie them to that poppet. Yep.
The more you can tie them to the poppet, the more that poppet magically becomes keyed to them, tied to them, and the more powerful your spell will be.
And if you use the cloth ones that kind of look like gingerbread men sewn together, you can also stuff them with your paper with a name on it or any of your tag items, or also you can stuff it with herbs. Say it's a healing spell, for example, you can stuff it with some healing related herbs in there too. So there's really a lot you can do with them. And I think that this actually made me think that this is really the same thing as voodoo dolls. This is just
It is. It's just a different culture. Representing a human form is a very powerful form of magic. Taking someone's picture, drawing them. These are types of sympathetic magic that can be very powerful. So you'll find this across multiple cultures. But voodoo dolls are something that's specific to a closed religion. So I wouldn't do a voodoo doll.
One thing I have done, speaking of pictures that you mentioned, I have actually taken a picture of someone and just cut out their face and affixed it to my poppet. so that my puppet actually had that person's face
That
on it.
person's face, yeah. Draw their face, or
Write their name on a piece of paper and stick it where maybe the face would be.
you could cut a paper doll out of paper, maybe out of your favorite magazine, or maybe out of a piece of paper that's your favorite color or their favorite color, and then dress it like you would a paper doll. But there's all sorts of things that you could do to represent this person. Anoint it with oils, incense, smoke.
You know what I found in doing this project?
What's that?
A very cheap way to make those types of poppets that you can kind of stitch together and fill. Did you know, shameless plug, at Walmart, you can buy 2 yards of fabric for $4. And you can pick any. I happen to get like a black and white stripe pattern, but you can get any type of fabric and literally just draw a shape like a gingerbread man, essentially. That's the
Hmm.
best analogy I can use. Cut the two pieces, stuff that sucker, and sew it up.
Or for maybe someone that was a good friend that maybe stabbed you in the back and turned into a complete and total terrible, awful person, maybe they gave you one of their shirts that had been their favorite shirt for a long time. It's possible. It could happen. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. This is a hypothetical.
We would never do this.
But take that shirt and make a poppet out of that. Stuff it with the rest of the shirt, which you may or may not have ripped into teeny tiny little shreds in anger and then stuffed it into the poppet. You know, that could possibly be a very powerful way to create a little doll.
Nothing we've ever done before, just something we read on news.
I'm sure I read that somewhere. I'm pretty sure I read about that somewhere. Has nothing to do with anyone we both mutually know. Anyway, the closer you can get this doll, this poppet, to represent the person, the more things that you can get from them, the more powerful and more connected.
More effective it's going to be.
That's
Yeah.
right. Should you cast magic on someone without their permission? Probably not.
I ain't judging. That's a you thing.
Do what you feel needs to be done. But these can be done for good or for ill. It does not have to be baneful magic. And it doesn't have to be for someone else. It can be for you.
For yourself, yeah.
One of our mutually favorite witches, Irene Glass, has an article about poppets for the holidays, actually, to help you get through the holidays. Make a poppet for yourself that represents you and fill it with herbs for calmness, relaxation, self-love, standing up for yourself, boundaries, strength, whatever you happen to need to get through the holidays. You know, she talks about making a poppet to help yourself. And all the things we were just talking about making a poppet for someone else, you can apply to yourself. Use your own hair, your own saliva, your own blood, your own fingernails, your own clothes, and make a poppet to represent you and put good things into it, or use that as a charm to help you through a certain situation.
And just like I said, that you can pick different like herbs associated with what your intent is. Same with your colors. You know, if you're doing something healing, it could be like yellow or orange. You know, you could do pink or red for love, or silver or gold or green for money. You know, whatever your intent is, you can have, you know, if you're making one of those fabric puppets or the yarn, the little yarn dolly, you can have the colors represent that type of magic you're trying to create, as well as the herbs.
The whole purpose of these is to hold your intention, and you can make the creation of this poppet part of your spell or part of your ritual. So you would gather all your materials together and you would create this poppet in ritual space. You could make the creation of it part of your spell work.
And like that baby doll I got to use as a puppet, again, like you were saying earlier, I was going to draw some symbols on it. I was going to draw on the clothing on it. I might actually take the outfit off and create a dress out of material for it to kind of customize the doll more. So even if it's something like that you've purchased, you can even still customize to reflect what you're working.
And I highly recommend that you do. This is one of those types of magic that you can't really just buy a poppet.
I know. I was just thinking that in my head. I'm like, there's so many stores here in Salem where you can just go buy them. Don't.
You can. I mean, sure, buy a doll, buy a poppet. But if you just do that and then don't do anything else and be like, here's a poppet, fuck you, I hope you lose your job. It's just not going to work.
I bought this online. Damn it. Why isn't it working?
Right. This is a type of folk magic. This is a get your hands dirty, get in and do it kind of magic. If you do buy a doll, you'd best be, like Chelle said, putting symbols on there, writing sigils, putting
Right.
oil on there, changing the clothes, changing the color hair. You really need
Not
to
to
get
mention,
dirty.
not to mention also prior to doing all of that, cleanse it of like I got this thing at Walmart or maybe Target or Walmart, cleanse it of the Walmart Target energy and then do all of those things. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to go with what works for you, but I really think that for me, I know you like to weave the weeds. That's a good thing, a good phrase
That
for
is
you.
a good thing. I love that. I'm a weed
I
weaver.
like to weave the weeds.
I do.
I like the little yarn dolly. I do. Love it.
The yarn dolly is great. That goes along with my weed weaving. So I'm going to show you a bunch of my little dollies.
I love those.
And I know they don't look like a doll, but what it is not magic.
Essentially, yeah.
And so what I found while I was learning about these is that, okay, so they're traditionally made for llamas, and corn, the corn part of corn dolly can mean any type of grain. It doesn't have to be the corn husk dolly.
What we think of as corn.
Yeah. Again, these were made to embody the spirit of the goddess, the earth goddess, the harvest goddess, the grain goddess. While I was making these, I found that yes, they're a beautiful craft for the first harvest, this Lughnasadh coming up to honor the god Lu. But while you're making these, the easiest ones are basically a 4-strand boondoggle. If you ever done boondoggle?
Actually, as a kid in summer camp with plastic strings, we would make necklaces out of boondoggling.
So I found a tutorial online, and basically these traditional corn dollies are a 4-strand boondoggle. It's not that hard to do, and as you get into it, it gets to be very rhythmic.
It actually it's almost, I hate to use one of your favorite things, but it's almost meditative.
It's very meditative. I love
There,
it
I
so much.
said it. Damn
You
it.
did. As you do it, it's like any type of knitting or weaving
Or
or
braiding.
boondoggling, braiding. It's very meditative and very conducive to not magic. So after I made a couple and got the hang of it, I decided to get very fancy. And here's this one that actually looks like a little doll. I made this one look like a little person and decorated
You're
it
so
with
freaking
flowers.
crafty.
Right? But I started making them into spells. So as I was doing this, I was thinking about Lammas and the first harvest and the things that I want to harvest. I was thinking about Lughnasadh. I was thinking about the sun and growth. And so I was weaving that into each of these knots as I made the dolly. And then you make a circle to be the head, and you can think about fullness and the completion of your spell as you tie these together. Let it dry, keep it on your altar to remind you of that spell, or toss it in a fire or bury it like people would traditionally do. It makes a phenomenal spell. You don't have to just braid it and be like, yay, Lughnasadh. You can make it into a spell for abundance, for health, for happiness, for love, for whatever. It's freaking not magic.
Now, essentially, we decided to do this, and you understood the assignment, and I again took it with a left turn and went a total pop it down the road different way. Still related, but I found the same. I was thinking about the same thing as I was making my yarn dolly. Because you are doing not magic when you're tying off the head and when you're tying off the arms. And now with this, it's kind of not necessarily so much a llama specific thing. And in this particular case, unknowingly, I was thinking about a person when I was making this. That'll be a different conversation on a different episode. It's basically all of those same things, except this wasn't llamas. Like your quote unquote spell was llamas related, and my quote unquote spell was more person specific.
Yeah, I guess mine kind of veered more into an abundance spell, but that
You
kind of fits with
understood
Lughnasadh.
yeah, you understood the assignment, and I took a left turn.
It's okay. We were going to Poppets anyway, so you're right on track.
I just couldn't find corn is where this all started.
Yeah, and that's what really surprised me. Like I said, is I was also thinking corn, the big ears of delicious sweet corn that we love up here. But
Yeah.
no, corn is any kind of grain.
Maybe because I've seen a corn husk dolly multiple
Yes.
times. Maybe that's why when I heard corn dolly, I was like, oh my God, I can make that, but there's no freaking corn.
Yeah, and making a corn dolly, or you can buy raffia, or you can also buy, if you ever make tamales. I don't know if you like to cook tamales or not, but you can buy dried corn husks right in right at your grocery store if they have a section for that.
I wouldn't even know where to look for that. I wouldn't even know where to look for that.
Usually in the Mexican food section, you can usually find it right there because tamales, you need those dried corn husks to make those yum yum tamales.
My local Whole Foods guy is going to think that I'm making tamales when I'm really making corn dollies.
Hey, that works.
What they don't know won't hurt them.
The braiding one, the boondoggle corn dolly, is very, very easy and simple. Making a corn husk dolly is a little more involved, but that can still be turned into a spell or a ritual for Lughnasadh or for some other thing, for a regular spell. Like Chelle said, this could just be a poppet at any time of year. It doesn't have to be for Lughnasadh.
See, and that's why I like the yarn dollies, because let's say you have a couple of intents with your little poppet doll and you have a couple different workings, you can use different colored yarns to make the one dolly.
Right. Maybe you're doing something for your friend and they asked for, heart healing. They asked for inspiration. Maybe they asked for new love. And so you put all
And
those
the lottery
colors in there.
numbers.
And the lottery numbers.
Don't forget the lottery numbers.
Oh, chaos magic. If only you would come through for me on that one. But you can just add all those different things. You can put oil on the yarn. You can tie it off with different threads.
The other thing you can do with poppets is you can almost turn it into your own, what the hell am I trying to say? Representation of your deity that you particularly work with. Maybe you can't afford one of those kick-ass, like $200 statues of Athena. Don't worry, because neither can I. But you want something to represent the deity that you are drawn to. Let's say I didn't have a representation of Hecate. I could make a little corn dolly. Let's say I could take little keys. I could tie keys to some of the strands of yarn. You know how they have those Pandora charms? I could get a little Pandora charm of a dog and I could turn it into my own personal hellhound and have it tied down like by where her feet would be. It's
Right?
like, like you could, if you would like, because witchcraft doesn't have to cost you cash here, folks. You could make a representation of deity out of one of these dollies as well. And kind of, I don't want to say use that to direct it to, but kind of use that when you're directing your appreciation or, you're giving your thanks or what have you.
Especially harvest goddesses. I mean, Demeter, Persephone, I guess, isn't exactly a harvest goddess, but it could work for her too. But if you worship Ceres, Lakshmi, and Sif are all goddesses of harvest and of grain. Pick a harvest goddess and make your corn dolly or your poppet represent her. That would be a
It's
great
called
way to
poor
do
man's
that.
witchcraft, man. Poor man's witchcraft. We love
That's
that.
right. Got to do what you got to do.
Gotta do what you gotta do. And this is so that's why I think that poppets and dollies are very versatile, maybe because this isn't something that's, should be costing you bundles. And if you need to make a Hecate out of some black yarn, rock on with your damn bad self.
Yeah, use your scrap yarn, use your scrap cloth. You can make poppets out of anything. And the corn dollies that I made to represent Lughnasadh and the corn dollies that I made just as not magic spells, I just got tall grass out of my back field or lavender. The other ones I made, I got lavender out of my garden and some flowers out of my yard. So it doesn't have to be shit you go buy. You can just get stuff outside and use that. Or like Chelle did, scraps.
I'd just like to point out to all of our listeners, Layla does all these things with outside scraps, which is wonderful and crafty and very pagan of her. But I'm allergic to everything on the planet. And the minute I go cutting that grass, I can't breathe and my eyes are watering and everything itches.
Yep. And both of those work. I love your yarn dolly. I really like the versatility of that yarn dolly. Maybe you live in the city. Maybe you're a city witch. Or,
Right.
Like Chelle, maybe you are allergic to anything green and you can't go outside.
And that was kind of interesting because I was thinking about things like that when we were down in New York City this past weekend. And, there isn't the option to just go cut some grass and do that. So you gotta use what you can work with, man. And as long as it's in the shape somewhat of a human, go for it. I mean, I would even go so far as if you had to actually make dough, use a cookie cutter in the shape of a gingerbread man and cut that shit out and use that, do it.
What better way to do, say, a self motivation spell than to mix up some fabulous cookies? And, as you're adding your cinnamon, make sure that that's for that get up and go. When you're adding your brown sugar, that's, to sweeten your heart to yourself. And as you're making these cookies and turn it into a gingerbread man or a cookie man,
Or a poppet man.
now you've added these spell components to it and turned the whole process into a spell. And then you eat that cookie after you bake it. That's internalizing those ideas. That's internalizing that spell energy. Just like if you're harvesting your cannabis and you roll, have you ever seen those joints, Chelle, where they have like the little arms? It's like a three-headed joint. So you can do that. Now you've got a little joint poppet. I don't care how you make your poppet. There's all sorts of ways to do that. And it can be to honor the season. It can be to honor yourself. It can be to do a spell.
Or someone just pissed you off.
Or someone pissed you off. Or you really need that irritating coworker to get a promotion to another department. There's a lot of different reasons to make poppets. Or corn dollies.
Or corn dollies. I just think it's funny that we totally went left field and opposite directions with this under the same premise.
We'll post up some pictures of the different types of corn dollies and poppets that we made so that you can see, and we'll post links to different ways to make either a poppet or a braided corn dolly or a corn husk dolly. And
try it
so that you can try that magic yourself.
This is absolutely a fun summer. Try it because it's quick, it's easy, and you can do a lot with it.
I mean, I grabbed 4 strands of that really tall grass out of my back field and was able to do an amazing knot magic spell just like that. The yarn that you got, these are not, you don't have to think a lot or grab a lot for these spells.
Right.
They can be on the spot. Here's the spell, do that magic and be done.
Be done. Yeah.
Or you can take longer and make a more elaborate doll out of it. I love magic that can be tailored to the situation, what you need at that time.
That's kind of more like what the baby doll would be used for, because that would involve, drawing symbols and kind of crafting that to us and, cleansing it initially. That would be more of an intense intention, and probably on a most specific person. So really, it just depends on what you're doing and how you want to use it.
Yep. And it can be fun. I like to make little crafts, so I had a good time making this. It was definitely, really good. It's certainly something you could do with kids if you're doing it for the season, not necessarily if you're doing it to curse your coworker.
But if you're doing it to curse your coworker, this little black yarn dolly, it's a good go-to.
There you go.
Not that we would do such things.
Get some of their clothes, just saying. So we have lots of great episodes coming up for you over the next couple weeks. We have an interview with an author coming up, as well as more Lammas/Lughnasadh crafts and more information about the upcoming holiday and things that you can do for solitary practitioners, all you witches out there. But it is getting to be summertime, Chelle, so we are pretty busy witches coming up the next month or so.
And I hear someone, hint, hint, Laylla, has a radio show coming up at a festival. So you'll have to put the links out there so that all the folks can check out the radio show you'll be a part of.
I'm actually pretty excited because this is the first year that this radio station will be available online for people to stream. So I will be putting up a link so you can listen to the Brushwood radio station, including 2 radio shows by yours truly. I'm also thinking about maybe for our benefactors, opening up a Zoom while I'm doing the radio show and doing a question and answer session with Chelle and I during the radio show. So we'll see how that goes.
I wish I could be there. I can't be there with you, but definitely I will Zoom into that.
Soon enough, Chelle. We've been working on manifesting you coming to these festivals with me. It'll happen. It's going to happen.
We need to manifest me not having a day job, folks.
There you go.
If every one of you could put that out into the universe, I'd appreciate it.
But thank you so much to Terry and our other wonderful fan that we saw at New York City. Thank you to Star for Witches Fest USA. And thank you to all of you guys for listening and hanging out with us each week and getting your witch on. If you would like, subscribe, give us some stars, a review, send us a text. We have that option now in the show notes. Email us at backonthebroomstick@gmail.com. Check out our website, our Instagram, our YouTube.
And we're going to post pictures of our corn dolly and poppets. And if you folks out there are making corn dollies and poppets, I want to see that shit. So send us some pics.
We will see you next week on Back on the Broomstick. But until then, stay cool, people, because it's freaking hot out there. And as always, stay wise, stay wicked, and keep it witchy.